Have you ever replayed a conversation so many times that it started to feel more real than the conversation itself? You leave a meeting, or a dinner with friends, or a simple text exchange. And hours later, you're still there, still wondering if that pause lasted too long, if that joke sounded awkward, if they noticed the hesitation in your voice. Visual, a lone figure walking through a quiet city street, while faint echoes of past conversations appear as blurred text around them. Most people call this overthinking. But what if that's the wrong name? What if your mind isn't trying to torture you? What if it's trying to protect you? Because there's a strange pattern hidden inside these endless mental rehearsals. You don't replay every conversation, only the ones that felt emotionally risky, and that difference changes everything. It rarely starts with big moments. It's usually something so ordinary that nobody else would notice. A friend takes longer than usual to reply. Your manager says, "Can we talk tomorrow?" Someone laughs after you finish speaking. Not at you, at least you don't think so, but before reality has a chance to answer, your brain already has. Visual, ripples spreading across still water as a single notification appears on a phone screen. Within seconds, your mind begins building possibilities. Maybe they're disappointed. Maybe they think you're incompetent. Maybe you've said too much. Maybe you've ruined something you didn't even realize was fragile. From the outside, nothing has happened. Inside your head, an entire emotional emergency has already begun. That's why people tell you to stop overthinking. But they don't realize something important. You're not searching for answers. You're searching for safety, and those are very different goals. This pattern slowly spreads into every part of your life. Before sending an email, you read it 6 times. Before asking someone for help, you rehearse every possible response. Before speaking in a group, you predict every expression on every face, even after making a simple decision. Your mind quietly asks, was that the wrong choice? Visual, a maze made from handwritten notes and crossed-out sentences. At first, it feels responsible. Careful people survive right. Thinking ahead seems smart. Planning feels mature. But eventually something changes. The rehearsal becomes longer than the experience itself. You spend more time preparing for life than actually living it, and without realizing it, your confidence slowly begins depending on prediction instead of experience. That's the hidden cost. Something even stranger begins to happen. You stop trusting your first reaction, not because it's usually wrong, but because your brain convinces you that one more thought might finally make you certain. One more scenario. One more possibility. One more review. Certainty always feels just one thought away, but it never arrives. Visual, a hallway with endless doors, each opening into another identical hallway. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a search for cognitive closure. The mind desperately wants uncertainty to disappear, but emotional uncertainty doesn't work like a math problem. It cannot always be solved. Sometimes it can only be tolerated. And if your brain never learned that uncertainty could be survived, it keeps searching anyway. Not because it's irrational, because somewhere deep inside. Uncertainty became associated with danger. That's why reassurance rarely lasts. Someone tells you, don't worry, everything's fine. You feel better for a while, then another thought appears. But what if they were just being polite? And suddenly you're back where you started. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. The reassurance isn't fake, it just can't stay. Because your brain isn't asking, is everything okay? It's asking something much older. Am I safe? Visual, water slowly leaking from a cracked glass despite being continuously refilled. And those two questions lead to completely different kinds of thinking. This is the part most people never see. Your thoughts aren't random. They're organized, not around logic, around protection. Almost like your mind has become a security guard who never clocks out. It checks every memory, every conversation, every facial expression, every silence. Not because it enjoys worrying, but because it believes missing one warning sign could cost you something important. Acceptance, belonging, connection, respect. Visual, a security guard watching dozens of surveillance screens, each showing ordinary social moments. From the outside, it looks like anxiety. From the inside, it feels like responsibility. And that's exactly why it's so difficult to stop. Because giving up the rehearsal doesn't feel relaxing. It feels reckless, as if you're lowering your guard in a world that might punish you for it. But here's the question that quietly changes everything. What if your mind isn't practicing for the future? What if it's still preparing for a past that has already ended? Because that's where this pattern usually begins. And once you understand that, your thoughts start making sense in a completely different way. The strange thing about your brain is that it doesn't care very much about the difference between what is happening and what might happen if a possibility feels emotionally important. Your brain often treats it as something worth preparing for, not because it's irrational, because prediction has always been one of its most valuable survival tools for thousands of years. The humans who noticed danger before it arrived were more likely to survive. Your nervous system inherited that habit. The problem is, modern life rarely asks you to escape predators. Instead, it asks you to navigate conversations, relationships, interviews, messages that end with a period instead of an emoji. The threats changed, but the prediction system stayed the same. Visual, an ancient forest slowly dissolving into a modern office filled with glowing computer screens. This is where emotional survival begins. Imagine your brain as a weather forecast. A good forecast isn't trying to guarantee sunshine. It's constantly scanning the horizon for storms. If there's even a small chance of rain, it prepares you. Your mind works in a surprisingly similar way, except the storms it looks for aren't always physical. They're emotional: embarrassment, rejection, disappointment, conflict, being misunderstood. So when your friend suddenly becomes quieter than usual, your brain doesn't simply observe the silence. It starts forecasting. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset? Did I miss something? Not because those thoughts are true, but because your brain believes preparing for emotional pain is safer than being surprised by it. Visual, dark clouds forming above one person while the sky around them remains clear. This is why overthinking often feels productive. It creates the illusion of control. Every new possibility feels like another layer of protection, another escape route, another backup plan. But here's the paradox: the more your brain rehearses, the more it teaches itself that rehearsal is necessary. Behavioral psychology has a simple principle: whatever reduces anxiety in the short term, the brain is likely to repeat. Think about checking your phone after sending an important message. You look once, then again, then 5 minutes later. Each check briefly lowers uncertainty. Your brain notices that relief and quietly says, "Remember this, do it again next time." The habit grows stronger, not because checking solved anything, but because it temporarily reduced discomfort. Overthinking follows the same loop. Every imagined scenario feels like you're becoming more prepared. The relief lasts only moments, then uncertainty returns, so your brain starts another rehearsal. And another, without realizing it. You've entered a cycle where thinking becomes the solution to the discomfort created by thinking. Visual, a hamster running endlessly on a wheel that slowly transforms into a spinning thought bubble. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as a prediction machine. Its job isn't to perfectly understand reality. Its job is to reduce surprise. Most of the time, that's incredibly useful. You don't consciously calculate how to walk, or catch a ball, or recognize someone's face. Your brain predicts these things automatically, but prediction becomes more complicated with people. People don't follow equations, they change their minds. They hide emotions, they send mixed signals, which means your prediction system never receives perfect information. Instead, it fills in the blanks, sometimes accurately, sometimes not. And here's the important part. The brain usually fills missing information with whatever feels safest to prepare for, not whatever is most likely. That's why a delayed reply can become a story about rejection. A neutral facial expression becomes disappointment. A short email becomes criticism. Your brain isn't trying to be pessimistic. It's trying to avoid being caught off guard. Visual, a puzzle with several missing pieces, slowly being filled with dark-colored pieces before the real pieces appear. This pattern becomes even stronger if your earlier experiences taught you that. Emotional safety could disappear without warning. Maybe approval felt unpredictable. Maybe affection depended on performance. Maybe mistakes carried consequences that felt bigger than they should have. The brain remembers patterns more than individual events. It quietly builds rules. Stay alert, read between the lines, don't miss the warning signs. Those rules might have genuinely protected you once. But the brain rarely asks whether an old survival strategy still fits a new environment. It simply repeats what worked before. Think of it like carrying an umbrella every single day because years ago you were caught in one terrible storm. At first, the umbrella made sense, but eventually, you stopped checking the weather. You just assume rain. That's what emotional rehearsal becomes, an umbrella for storms that often never arrive. Visual, someone walking under an open umbrella beneath a bright, cloudless sky. This is also why telling yourself to stop thinking so much almost never works. You're arguing with the symptom, not the system. The deeper system believes those thoughts are keeping you emotionally alive. If you suddenly remove them, your brain interprets that as removing protection. Which explains why trying not to think often creates even more thinking. Your mind isn't refusing to cooperate. It's doing exactly what it was trained to do. The real shift doesn't happen when you force your brain to stop predicting. It happens when your brain slowly learns something it never fully believed before. That uncertainty is uncomfortable, but not dangerous, and that changes everything, because once your nervous system begins separating uncertainty from actual threat, the endless rehearsals slowly lose the job they were trying so hard to perform. In the next part, you'll see how to teach your brain that lesson, not through positive thinking, but through small experiences that gradually rewrite its prediction system. The instinct to rehearse every possible outcome isn't something you can simply switch off. And trying to fight it usually makes it stronger, because your brain hears the fight as confirmation that the danger is real. So the goal isn't to stop predicting. It's to teach your nervous system that prediction isn't always necessary. That lesson doesn't come from one realization. It comes from repeated experiences, small ones, almost forgettable ones. Because that's how the brain rewires itself, not through a single insight, but through evidence. Visual, a narrow forest path gradually becoming clearer with each step forward. Step 1. Catch the question beneath the thought the next time you find yourself replaying a conversation. Don't ask, "How do I stop thinking about this?" Ask something quieter. "What danger is my brain trying to prepare me for?" Maybe it's rejection, maybe embarrassment, maybe disappointing someone, maybe losing control. Behavioral psychology shows that labeling an emotion reduces its intensity. When you name the hidden fear, your brain shifts some activity away from automatic emotional circuits and toward areas involved in reflection and regulation. You're no longer trapped inside the feeling. You're observing it. For example, instead of thinking, "Why am I obsessing over that meeting?" you might realize, "I'm afraid they think I'm incompetent." That one sentence changes everything. Because now you're working with the real problem, not just the noisy thoughts surrounding it. Visual, a tangled knot slowly revealing a single thread at its center. Step 2. Replace prediction with observation. Overthinking often asks, "What does this mean?" Instead, practice asking, "What do I actually know?" Notice the difference. Your brain naturally fills missing information with imagined explanations. Observation interrupts that habit. Suppose a friend hasn't replied for several hours. Prediction says, "They're upset with me." Observation says, "I sent a message 6 hours ago, I don't know why they haven't replied." That sounds almost too simple, but cognitively, it's a powerful shift. You're separating facts from forecasts, and each time you do that, your prediction system receives new information. Not every unknown needs an answer immediately. Visual, 2 paths diverging, one covered in question marks, the other lit by simple footprints. Step 3. Practice small moments of uncertainty. This is where real change begins. The brain updates its beliefs through experience, not arguments. If you always seek reassurance, your nervous system never gets the chance to discover that uncertainty can resolve itself. So begin with something small, send a message, and resist checking your phone for 15 minutes. Share an idea in a meeting without mentally replaying every sentence afterward. Leave a harmless typo in a casual text, not because mistakes are good, but because perfection isn't the requirement for connection. At first, your brain will protest. You'll feel tension. That's expected. Neuroscience calls this prediction error. Your brain expected danger, but when the danger doesn't arrive, it slowly updates its internal model. Each successful experience becomes quiet evidence. Maybe I don't need constant rehearsal after all. Visual, a phone resting face down while sunlight slowly moves across the table. Step 4. Let reality finish the story. One reason emotional rehearsal never ends is because your brain keeps interrupting reality with imagined endings. You receive half the information, then your mind writes the other half. Try a different approach. When you notice yourself completing the story, pause, wait for reality to provide the next page. Sometimes your manager simply wanted to schedule tomorrow's meeting. Sometimes your friend was asleep. Sometimes the awkward silence existed only inside your own memory. Psychologically, this strengthens what's called tolerance for ambiguity. Instead of forcing certainty, you learn to coexist with not knowing, and surprisingly, that often creates more peace than certainty ever could, because certainty is impossible. Tolerance is trainable. Visual, an unfinished book slowly receiving its next page instead of being imagined. There's a simple mental model that ties all of this together. Imagine your mind as a smoke alarm. A healthy smoke alarm reacts when there's real fire. An overly sensitive smoke alarm reacts to burnt toast, steam from a shower, even a little dust. The problem isn't that it makes noise. The problem is that it learned everything might be a fire. Your overthinking works the same way. It isn't evidence that you're weak, or broken, or incapable. It's evidence that your emotional alarm system became highly sensitive. Maybe because sensitivity once kept you safe. But an alarm doesn't become healthier by removing the batteries. It becomes healthier by learning the difference between smoke and sunlight. Visual, a smoke alarm remaining quiet while morning sunlight fills a peaceful kitchen. So perhaps the question isn't, how do I stop overthinking? Perhaps it's, what experience